Well, hello and welcome in everybody to the Code 3 Conversations. I am CC Strong and this is Code 3 Conversations. I want to let you know right out of the gate that this all came about after a crash to my career. I was a lieutenant with the LA County Sheriff's Department, and during my husband's last run, when he ran on the last ticket for sheriff during the campaign, I became politically targeted. I was labeled a bully. I was brought into an office and said that I was mistreating my staff, that I had grabbed a guy looking for tattoos, and I grew up in Compton, so that was heavily leaned on as part of the reason that I was supposedly this ogre. I won't belabor you with all those details, but you can actually find a lot about me on my platform, ccstrong.com, just like my name.com. And you can actually go back, connect in, and learn more about the story. I can be found on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you can find out more information about that. I can share with you that I won my arbitration in April of this year. That was 4 years ago when that happened. But just here recently, it was deemed that my contractual rights were violated and that I had been disciplined without just cause. It was horrible. But I can tell you that during that time, instead of sitting back and stewing in that, I got to work. I became an author. I became an international speaker. I opened an e-commerce clothing line and it is up and running and things are going amazing. How did I do all of that? I dug deep and decided that the person that they tried to say that I was really wasn't who I am. And by doing that, I was able to combat and push back and use the resources and some tips and tricks that I've used throughout my entire career to push back. And when I say push back, it was not easy, but I now help people one on one to navigate those choppy waters in the workplace. And it's an amazing thing to be able to hold someone's hand because I see it as going back into the fire, carrying buckets to help them come out. Well, enough about that. Code 3 Conversations is one of the things that I developed while I was going through all of this madness. And it is the conversations we're not having about law enforcement and community, of which I'm from both. So we all are community, and we should be. But sometimes in wearing the uniform, some wear the uniform with pride and honor, and there are many of us. And then there are some of us where the uniform wears them and it becomes every waking hour of what they do. So today on Code 3 Conversations, we have 4 topics and we always hope to get to all 4. Sometimes we don't. But sometime every blue moon, we actually end up chopping off one of the Code 3 conversation topics. Tonight, we hope that we'll get to all 4, but we encourage you, and I would ask all of you who are sitting over on the audience side, the people that we can't see but who are watching, I want to welcome you in, and I want to ask you, if you can, and you have the chat feature, drop a 1 in the chat so that I can know that you're able to hear me. And I'm going to turn on so I can make sure I see it. If you can hear my voice right now, I want you to just drop some 1s in the chat. Thank you so much. I do not tell names, and here's why. Because I like the people to be able to sit back, have something to drink, grab some snacks, and get involved in the conversation, be it in the chat, be it you being quiet and, hey, I just want to see what this whole thing is about, or raising your hand and coming over to the panel side. Well, if you notice, there's a gentleman on the screen with me, as well as you will see my team members are here. And I already have someone raising their hand, and I really, really love that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring in that gentleman on the screen who happens to be my husband. Yes. For many years, he was my partner. We actually worked together. And later on, being married, I now get an up close and personal vision of a partner that I had a lot of admiration for. He was a mentor of mine for many years, and I learned a lot. So I'm going to ask Eric to come on in the room. Let us see you. Um, Give a wave to everybody. We're ready to get started with the Code 3 Conversations. And I want to actually go and see, I have a person who raised their hand who was in the chat. I'm going to take a look. They might have raised it and then they lowered it, but I'll go back to that. And yes, the person who asked the question in the chat, ccstrong.com is your site. Absolutely. It is myname.com. So you can check that out. And then I'll also have my team drop that link in the chat for you throughout this time. So Eric, are you ready?
I am ready. Let's get it
Awesome.
cracking. Let's go.
Awesome. I love it. So I am going to share my screen with all of you, and we're going to get started and see if we unveil our first Code 3 Conversations topic. So hopefully you can see my screen. And if you can, do me a favor, drop some threes in the chat. Then I know you actually can see it. And we're going to get started. So those of you who are watching in the audience, please let me know that you hear me and that you can see the screen. So the first topic of conversation is report writing. And I say this is for everything. Basically, most professions that we have today, there are some levels of a report. You have to report what's going on. I am of the philosophy that there is a chronological order to a reporting. And I always said the way that you keep from missing anything in report writing is to write the who, what, when, where, how, and why. And that is so similar to a later topic that we have for you tonight. It's something basic that we learned as children. If we hit all of those points, you're highly unlikely to miss anything. That's just my opinion. But I also know some things have happened where report writing is not always great. Sometimes people are using the reports and their authority in tandem with that, and it's not always good. So, Eric, your thoughts on report writing? It could be anything, reviewing them, what you think about them. Let me hear what you have to say.
Oh, that's a deep one. That's a such a long topic because everything that we do, especially in law enforcement, we pretty much have to document it. Our reports make their ways through a series of approval processes. They end up out at district attorney's desk. They end up on a defense attorney's desk in a file. They end up in front of a judge sometimes. They end up in front of a jury. They end up in civil claims, civil lawsuits. Our reports are so important. And especially in the earlier days before cameras, you just really had to articulate your observations, whether they be, something that you saw, something that you smelled, something that you heard. You had to really articulate what you did and why you did it, in a report. So they're extremely important. Um, Unfortunately, they're also easy to manipulate. So, yeah, report writing is the key. I mean, they say that law enforcement is 25% doing the public safety work and 75% writing what you did. So they're very important, very key. So let's stay on that for a minute. Let's go and see what questions you might have or topics you might have on the report writing. But extremely, extremely, extremely important for them to be accurate and for them to be well written.
Absolutely. So you know me, I always have here's my experience. I had an experience where I had a supervisor want me to change a report because that supervisor was trying to protect someone. In essence, that supervisor was fearful of the person and just wanted to keep the peace. They didn't want to have any backlash from this individual. So they felt it was easier to come to me to ask me to lie. Oops, I said that word and I did it intentionally. Lie and change my report in support of this individual so that they would be able to make peace and not have any waves for themselves. It sounds crazy, but that particular individual had asked me to do that in the past and already knew that I wasn't about that. I got in the habit, and this is a little tip when I say the way I would combat things is I would send in my report electronically. So here's my first version, a draft for your review. In the event they're going to make some changes, but they got my clean cut initial take on what I saw, what I experienced, my actions, the who, what, when, where, how, and why. And it was a way for me to basically have a record going back to point to. I submitted it this way. So I'm sorry, we don't sign every page of our reports, not within my agency. So it makes it a little hard when you get something. And yeah, do I know if page 3 of 18 is the same page 3 of 18? And I would think, maybe I'm old, I don't know, that by now we would have a system in place where you can account for every page of that report. I know it's a lot of work, be it initials or something, but what's your view on the idea of someone wanting you to make a change on a report to fit a particular narrative? And I'm firing questions at you. Feel free to fire them back at me as well.
Right. You know, definitely not to fit a narrative. I mean, you know, there's lots of things, especially as young officers, deputies, and even when you get older. I mean, sometimes as a supervisor, if you're writing a report, you miss things. You know, there might be some things that are misspelled. There might be some things that are grammatically incorrect that you want to clarify. There may be some questions that could be answered in the report that aren't. So, getting those clarifying points, but changing a report so that it fits a certain narrative, no, because the report shouldn't fit a narrative. The report should document what happened, you know, and then sometimes it's necessary for an explanation. In other
Mhm.
words, if I say that use of force is very big or pursuit is very big, I can't just say in the report, I chased this guy, or I chased this woman, and I caught her and I took her to jail. No, I have to articulate what drew my attention to that person, what
Right.
gave me reasonable suspicion, what gave me probable cause, why I chased them, how I caught them, and what I'm taking them to jail for. So again, if you leave out some of those things, you have to do it. You have to fix those. But if we're trying to, you know, change the narrative to get a certain view of things, that sounds a little sketchy to me. And I just got to say this, you know, I had this sergeant one time tell me, I wrote in a report, this is how nitpicky reporting can get. I wrote in a report, I talked to the witness and they told me this. And I turned it in to be reviewed. And the sergeant told, you know, crossed out talked to and wrote spoke with and wanted me to change it on my report, change talked to spoke with. And I gave it back to her. I said, what's the difference? She said, spoke with sounds more, uh, whatever she said sounds better. I said, but it's not, it doesn't sound better to me. And I refused to change it. It's like,
Mhm.
no, there's nothing wrong. Talk to, spoke with, they can be synonymous. So sometimes you do get people that are really, really, you know, just nitpicky and just want to change something. But, you know, and even in the little things, you got to stand your ground sometimes. So you stood your ground.
I was a sergeant, and you that brought another thing to mind. And I had my lieutenant didn't like the word that, and literally let a report that I had turned in sit back in my in tray, uh, chewing up the deadline, you know, the window of completion of this whole entire packet because of the word that. And so when I opened to see the correction, and for whatever reason, she would use a green pen and it would drive me up a wall because I'm like, why does it have to be a green pen? But what all throughout the report, that was scratched out. I learned in English during college years that when you use, and I just said the word that, I learned that was in preface to, when you're prefacing something that someone said and not using their exact quote. So Eric said, Code3 Conversations is the best. You got that plug right. And he said it exactly that way. Code3 Conversations is the best. If he said that, if he said, well, I really like Code3 Conversations and I think it is the best, that's a direct quote compared to me just saying, Eric said that it was great and I just shortened it. So that's the way that I learned it. And I didn't understand why she was scratching out the word that throughout my report and then letting it sit for something like that. There was nothing contextually wrong. There was nothing that was missing. And what did you call it?
Like you just said, letting it sit for something like that.
Okay.
The word
I
that.
use the word that a lot. Well, someone in the chat says, sometimes when I am determining the exact report, being a perfectionist, I sometimes double think myself. Hats off. I'm going to raise my hand and say, I am so with you to the person who put that in the chat because I like to do things and get them right. And sometimes I overthink them. I second guess myself sometimes. And I'm not saying that this is what you're experiencing, but I know what that's like. It's like, oh, I let me go back over this again and again and again. And each time you go over it, you read it a little bit differently. And you may find something else. You might catch a mistake, or you might enhance it with something that's better, just the way that it's wording. I'm not too sure Eric spoke to and spoke with, or talked to and spoke with. Those are, to me, I do agree, kind of nitpicky, kind of the same thing, but it depends. I was scared, fearful when someone was asking me to change and remove something, because this person would have had to have been held accountable, and they were removing that accountability piece. And I think that is a key piece in what happens within agencies today. They will allow an okay, receiving whatever, sign off on it because this person's a good person and I know that they've got all their stuff together. Sometimes not even checking it, and they're okaying things that are wrong. So thank you to the person that actually put that in the chat as far as the sometimes double thinking yourself. Sadly, reports need to be very thorough. They need to actually show what happened. And shame on any officer, anybody who would adjust, fix, change, insert things, lie on, or do anything that would be wrong in a situation with a report writing. I know all too well, as a victim of lies and horrible IAB cases that were fake, too. Not that I'm complaining, too, because when the first one started crumbling, they put another one on me. This is a sore spot for me, because why? Why would you put someone through something, and why lie? I mean, lies are so acceptable in some settings, and that's not cool. You are not helping your partner by lying for them. I'm going to repeat that. You are not helping your partner by lying for them. You're hurting them. You need to pull
You
their
know,
gun belt.
I will say this, that, I used to hear it often, um, in the cop world or talk, that, they would write these reports to make them stick, because they were so convinced that they would arrest somebody and 2 or 3 days later they'd be out of jail. And these people were, such a detriment to society. And so they started writing the reports based on what the DA said that they wanted. And what we used to
Mm,
see oftentimes was every report was the same. And I'll give you
mm,
the old drop case. I turned the corner, I saw this person open their hand and a small item fall out, and then they took 4 or 5 steps away. I went and I found this item on the ground that resembled a white, rock-like substance. There was no other thing in the ground anywhere around them that resembled this. And therefore we arrested them for possession of, crack cocaine. And what you start seeing is that it morphed. You know what I mean? So you used to catch a person with crack cocaine on them, they get them around. But then when you caught them and they didn't have the crack cocaine on them, then the DA says, well, but I saw them drop it. Well, you didn't put that in a report. You got to put in the report that you actually saw them with it in their possession and drop it, not that you found it right next to where they were. So then all of a sudden, all these reports start coming out cookie cutter, and they all started looking the same. And that's not good either. You know what I mean? Because not every single incident is going to happen the exact same way. And if you're starting to write it just so that you can get the DA to file it, you're like, it's like you're saying, now you're lying. Because
yeah.
you can't say that it happened that way every single time. Because, and I remember back in the day, if you knew a guy was seated on a planter on a corner, and you went and you talked to him, you knew he was the local drug dealer, and you went and you dug around in the planter and you found the cocaine underneath the rock, the DA wouldn't accept that. He wouldn't say, well, he was in close proximity. No. So you have to have seen it in their possession. So guys started writing reports, which are basically false reports. And what it really did is it damaged the credibility of law enforcement,
Yeah.
because now every single report reads the same. It's impossible. And shame on, the law enforcement personnel out there that can't see that, and can't see that they're doing more harm than good. You think you're making something stick on this one guy, but
Mhm.
now you've done it 20 times in a month, and now you're damaging the credibility of your organization, of you as a report writer, and of the profession.
Yeah.
So, and it ended up hurting us a great deal in the long run.
I remember a young lady lost her job because of doctoring a report with a few sentences. And to me, it was like, this is crazy, literally crazy for someone to risk their job in in I'm going to just add that I was the one that actually saw this happen instead of it being someone told me and had me come over and take over from where they were. So just
Remember it
something as
well.
simple as say it again.
Remember that case well. I was at the case review for that case, if it's the same one.
It probably is because I think you
Mhm.
know where I was working at the time, and I keep that
Yep.
anonymous only because that way, hey, without giving you the full story on it, it's kind of hard to just say, hey, this is it. But I do know that the end result was that person lost their job because of a few sentences. And for
Yep.
me, if I stay in that accuracy of who, what, when, where, how, why, I probably can't go too wrong. And I actually won't be so bad off if I'm doing the right thing. Do the right thing in report writing. Write what happened. Don't add any extras. Don't remove things that could possibly be bad. Sometimes the stuff is just what it is and it needs to be worked through. So, report writing. Thank you for those in the chat. And if you're ready, Eric, we're going to move on to the next topic. What do you say? Did you say yes?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Okay, let's go. Next topic. So that is my report writing. The next one. Ooh, this is a good one. This one's a sore spot for me. Why do you look like that?
This is well, we were at a town hall not too long ago, and somebody was talking about retention and hiring and all these things that but anyway, go ahead. Kick it off. I'm ready.
Retention. Okay, so when I still with this particular topic, I would have done 4 more years in law enforcement. That was literally when you project out and you start getting into your older years on the department. The golden age is like 55 and 30 years. Having come on to the department at 24, my 30 hit at 54. And a couple of years before that, I was placed under this fake investigation. And you can
You
tell
just
I've
tell everybody how old you are. Oh my goodness.
I don't care. I'm
Okay.
blessed. I'm 54. I don't care how old. I don't, you know, people say I don't want to tell my age. I am blessed to be
All
as
right. I like
healthy
it.
and able to move around at least somewhat because I've got injuries, but that's a whole nother story for another day. But I take nothing from being the age that I am. But I will say that employee retention, I would not have ended my career the way that I did. And it was very painful to do so, but I wasn't going to give the department a third chance to take a shot at me. You know, it was getting progressively worse. And if I hadn't stepped away, they could have, Lord knows what. And I hate to think this drastic, but I'm going to go there. What happened if something was then planted? That could have put me in prison, could have, you know what I mean? Something in jeopardy of my life. I wasn't taking that chance. So leaving 4 years earlier, I still kind of had that itch of what would my retirement have really been like had I been able to go the full distance to make it to that end. Um, but employee retention right now, you hear it in the news that we're down, I think 1,500, and you probably know the numbers better than me, Eric, but that many employees down. But I can tell you, having worked internally, there are a lot of operational things that globally the people aren't working in key places. Like folks are in shadow positions that don't line up with the paperwork. I can recall PIM items is something that they would call them, like where everyone is assigned, but they would use 3 of these PIM items from this particular location and use them over in a different location. And this big grid of where everybody's working, no one was really working where they were assigned. Well, some people were, but you had these specialty assignments that would be created. And I got accused of doing that within my shop, that I was creating positions for people. I'm like, no, I'm having them work within their job specifications, something we also were looking at. What is the person supposed to be doing? And a lot of those folks weren't doing it. my philosophy is if you can check off everything that's on your job specifications and say, hey, I've done all of these, you're ready to move for that next step. If you're missing some of those items, I want to get you to the point where you're there. And now you can check off all of that because that's ultimately going to help you when you go into your next interview, when you go in your next meeting. And I'm having some success with that with clients who say, here, this is where I want to go. And here. So I have someone who is raising their hand. I just saw the hand raise and I missed that the last time. So
Well,
I'm going to ask him.
while you're bringing them in, let me just talk a little bit about what you just mentioned. And you know, when there's a fair process, when there's a fair promotional process, when there's people that are actually doing the job that they signed up to do, you know, it increases employee morale, employee enthusiasm for the job and the work that they do. When employee wellness and poor leadership is there, people don't want to stick around. You know, and what you were just describing, CC, is people don't understand. And if you don't understand, let me just break it down for you. You mentioned about that 30 years and 55. People that leave before 30 years and 55, especially those who are there at like 28, 29 years and they're 52, 53, they're leaving a lot of money on the table for their retirement. And that retirement means, yeah, you left a lot of money on the table. That retirement means that, you know, that's the check that you get just to wake up in the morning. You know, you're not going to work anymore. And when you're leaving that kind of money on the table because you just don't want to be bothered, because you just can't take it anymore, because it's just, you know, good leadership, people will go dig ditches next to you. Good leaders, people will go clean out porta potties because that's a job. And if you have good leadership, I've always said, you know, look, I'll dig ditches next to the right person. You know, but when you have it, it's not the job. The job wasn't so hard. It's not that, you know, it's not that you were just, you know, incapable of doing it anymore. It's that you don't want to deal with the nonsense anymore. And that's a problem for an organization. And just to clear things up, you mentioned 1,500. That was close to 1,500 on the sworn side,
Yeah.
probably equally so on the professional staff,
Mm,
which are the administrative people. So it's probably closer to 3,000 within our organization that are vacant. And many of those are because people just left. They do not want to be there anymore.
yeah. I've talked to some people who are very unhappy, and they don't like the trajectory of where things are going. And it's hard to, especially now being stepped away from it. I don't know. I don't see it firsthand. So it's hard to be the authority on that. I see whatever data there is or whatever I hear from podiums that this is what we're facing. But I want to invite in, I don't know the person's name, but the Zoom user who just raised their hand, if you want to unmute and let us know what you have to say, we'd like to hear from you.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you both for doing this. This is amazing. Actually, this is my first time listening to you guys, and I can relate a lot of topics that you two both discussed. I've been in the department almost 21 years, and I'm going something similar. And a question that I have for you both. You work along with a lot of deputies, and you see that favoritism if the deputies are liked by supervisors. Their job is so much easier than someone who just goes to work and works hard. How do you deal with that when you see all of that right in front of your eye?
Well, thank you for your question. And first, I almost want to say, I hear in your voice that's your experiences have not been good. And so I'm going to first say that I'm going to apologize to you. There should never be, and interestingly enough, I was accused of favoritism. Luckily, that was all found to be part of the lies stacked. But it was interesting that there was a core kind of group of people at an assignment when I arrived there, and they had been just left to do whatever they wanted to do, and people didn't like accountability. And much like the supervisor that I spoke about, who wanted me to change the reporting, she was actually exercising that very thing. She was allowing the people that she liked just like you said it, to get overtime, to receive the days off when they needed them, to do whatever it is that they wanted to do. And then when asked and questioned about that, she took offense to it. And I am the question rabbit. I'll be in a class and I want to know. And, Eric's nodding his head, but it is. I just want to know what the real deal is and what's truth. So I would often question those things, and it didn't make me popular. I did, however, have something in my favor. The people knew that I was going to tell you directly, being real and telling you the truth. And I would say that I wore a demeanor that was more stoic. So most people who met me, I was very direct and straightforward, but it didn't take away from the kindness at the core. Favoritism is one of the isms that take so much out of the profession. So Zoom user, I can't even make an excuse and say that you're wrong, because I've dealt with and worked with people for that very reason, because they've experienced that. And when they're not willing to just go along with what is being said for them, you become ostracized. It's one of the things that drives me nuts and leads to the very topic we're speaking about with employee retention. People don't want to be there. If I'm not going to be treated fairly, why do I want to be there in the first place? And I'm going to let Eric give you his take on it as well.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me second what CC said. Is that I could hear it in your voice, and that can be very, very disturbing. And it's something that I too have experienced. So I apologize that you're going through that. But I'm going to take it from a little bit of a different approach, and but yet and still the same. You see, when we're talking about, and I'm speaking specific to, the sheriff's department or law enforcement, sometimes you come up through an organization, sometimes you go through the academy together, you work at different assignments together, and you build relationships, you build friendships, you spend 8 hours, watching each other's back, in a radio car. And so, you get to know each other, you get to know their families, you get to know their hobbies. And what happens is you become friends, and you say, hey, you know what? You like riding motorcycles. I like riding motorcycles. Let's get on and go on a ride. Hey, you got a boat. I got jet skis. Let's go to the water. Or, hey, you like, whatever kind of music. I like whatever kind of music. Let's go to Coachella. Let's go to Stagecoach. Let's go to a concert. And so you get to know people, and then then people promote and they become supervisors. You don't lose your friendship. You're not expected to lose your friendship. And, it's about having a camaraderie, but that friendship cannot determine favoritism. That friendship cannot become, well, I don't like CC, and somebody's got to get drafted tonight for work. And even though we got a policy that dictates how we draft, hey, Eric, you're getting drafted. No, I'm sorry, CC, you're getting drafted tonight. Eric, you can go home because I know we got to get up early in the morning and go fishing. No, can't do that. And that becomes a major problem. And I will just say this, that everything comes down to leadership. Because if you have a supervisor, if you have somebody that's doing that, who's above them that's not checking their work? Who's above them that's not monitoring the workplace? Who's above them that is not looking at it and say, hey, you know what? I looked back a couple of weeks ago. Why does CC keep getting drafted for overtime and Eric never does? Something's wrong with that. So, it's one of those things where it really comes down to good leadership. How do you monitor your workplace? And then here's the biggest thing. If it gets reported and it's accurate and it's true, does leadership deal with it? Does leadership deal with it? Or do they say, well, you know what I mean? Hey, I heard this story from somebody that I know very close once before. Hey, what hill do you want to die on? How does it, yeah, like, you know what I mean? Or does it get reported like, well, do you want to make more waves for yourself? See, all of these things come down to failed leadership. And when it comes down to failed leadership, it's because our people haven't been properly trained, taught, or held accountable. So yes, that is a very difficult thing. And I don't know if this is part of your question, but I'm going to say this anyway, is I've always been that guy, and sometimes not in the nicest way. I might use some language like, hey, this is some BS. Or no, you're not going to do this. Or you know what? You're going to, and I start documenting and I start sending emails and I start sending things like to operations and I start sending people stuff to to the scheduling. And I'm just using the scheduling because the overtime thing, because that's like a common thing that happens like almost on every shift. Somebody's got to work overtime. They got to get drafted, but it could be favoritism for the summer team, the park team. It could be favoritism for a particular assignment, going to DB, you know what I mean? And going into operations, or, it could be a number of things. Even it could be your, the district, the car that you work in, so there's a lot of various ways that this can happen. But I really just kind of start writing things down. I start keeping my schedule, my in service, and I start documenting it so I can say, hey, this isn't a once over. This isn't just a twice over. This is a pattern. And you got to report it up the chain. That's kind of what I've dealt with. I've seen it many times. I know CC and I dealt with it for one particular place where one particular supervisor, sergeant, wanted to give all the people that weren't doing the work all the accolades and all the credit, and give the two people that were doing the work the hardest time. Why? Because of favoritism. He just didn't like, I don't know what he didn't like about us. There was something that we had in common that nobody else had. But anyway, I'm sorry. Let me be quiet.
You're speaking of someone who later became in the top seat.
Oh, that old sheriff? Yeah, I'm sorry. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Zoom user. I see you raised your
Zoom
hand again.
user,
Go ahead.
you go ahead and you have the floor.
So it was very well explained. The one thing that I will add, the department unfortunately doesn't like deputies who speak up their mind, who have very strong personalities, who can stand up for themselves and tell them, no, this is not the right way to deal with it. But they offer better positions for deputies that they have not put in the work in patrol, just because I have no idea exactly what things have done behind the scenes to be their favorite person or favorite deputy. However, I feel like that if you do less and you know how to play the game, you will go far in this department.
Yeah. And that's a very unfortunate view for any person to have. But you're right. You're so right. I mean, what you just said is accurate. I mean, it's something that I've heard many, many times. I've had many, many discussions about. And really, like I said, if you ask me, there's one reason for it, and that's failed leadership. That's really, because think about it. If leadership, I want to try to figure out how to put this the right way. If I'm a sergeant and I do this, and I become a lieutenant and I do it, but then I become a captain and I do it, and then I become a commander and I become a chief, the higher I go, the wider my scope of influence, the more I can offer favors and I can influence who gets what positions. But then once I get up there, what am I teaching all of those layers and levels below me? Hey, he or she did it, and you see how high they rose through the ranks. So you do it too. This is how you do it. And then eventually, now they're all becoming sergeants, lieutenants, captains, commanders, and then they're over and having more and more influence. And then what happens, that's how you develop culture. And it becomes a culture, it becomes the norm. Do less for more. One of the things, and I know I'm getting a little off topic here, but one of the things I'm going to talk about is this. When you work overtime, you sign up for overtime to go work wherever you're going to work. Let's just say in the jails. You're getting paid time and a half. But the culture of our department is when you go work overtime, you do less. You go there to put your feet up and let the people that normally work there do all the work, even though you're a body. So in other words, if it takes 5 people to do the job and there's only 4 regulars and you're the 5th one that's overtime, the overtimers feel like, hey man, you 4, go do the job. I'm here to kick back. That's a culture that got started somewhere, somehow. and people really believe it. And again, I just go back to this. It's just failed leadership over and over and over again. It's failed leadership. So you're absolutely right, Zoom user. It's a sad state to be in, but until leadership starts taking an active role and changing these kind of practices and changing this kind of behavior, until leadership is just says, hey, no more. This is the expectation. This is what you will do. And if I see you doing it, I will address it and hold you accountable. But here's the other thing. That leader, how do I say this? I'm just going to go to the chief level. If the chief sees a lieutenant doing that, right? Yes, the chief needs to check the lieutenant, but there's another layer of accountability there, because that chief needs to go to the captain and say, how come I had to see it? You didn't. How come you haven't fixed it already? How did this get to my level? And then you got to start holding the captains accountable. See, everybody wants to hold the deputies accountable. Nobody wants to hold those executives accountable. And those are the things that are going to really start changing the culture. Those are the things that are going to make, because that captain's going to say, hey, I can't turn the other, I'm saying the captain because I know that's who Cece was dealing with in her example of changing the paperwork. You know what I mean? Hey, captain.
And to your point, Eric, and also to Zoom user, I know that you're still there and you're listening over in the audience side. To the point of not just the captain. In my case, the captain kicked it up to the commander, and the commander instead turned it on me. Why aren't you signing off on this? Which speaks to what you're talking about with the culture. And we often talk about all the training that's necessary. Deputies need to be more trained, and that's what the community actually sees. So I get it. Your experiences as community are the people you deal with in patrol and every day. But you hit the nail on the head. What is being behind the scenes, in a sense, like the old show of the Wizard of Oz, and how this Oz was behind this curtain, and he's kind of pulling the strings through this booming voice that he's projecting out. What is the leadership doing to make sure that these type of things aren't happening? To the point of Zoom user, I had an incident where I realized that one of the professional staff in my office, as a training and scheduling sergeant, which I was at the time, was changing. And I'm not going to try to remember the acronym of CARP, so you can chalk it up to that age I spoke about earlier. But there's a thing where we take people who are not on patrol and they have to work a patrol shift. So we call it a CARP, a cadre of whatever. I don't remember the acronym. But there was a person that was sitting in the office, and after the person would CARP, which is basically removing one of their shifts. So if they're a detective, they work a 4-10. They would work 3 of their shifts, 10 hours, and then that last one would be a CARP, where they would go and work out in the field, or an adjustment of sorts. After the person was finishing their CARP, about a week later, before that payroll setting hit, the professional staff person would change the person's CARP to an overtime position. I can't make this up. And because I document so very well, I still have some of those documents from that time. I took that off and they blew it off like it was no big deal.
You cut out, Cece. I don't know what happened. We lost your volume.
Can you hear me?
No, there you are. You're back.
Okay, so sorry. I'm having some trouble with the mic, so forgive me for that. But what I was saying is that there was every excuse from the captain that this person, somehow there was a mistake in the system. I remember, and you remember, Eric, one Thanksgiving when I was a sergeant at a certain station and was told there was a glitch in the system, and they changed me from having the morning of Thanksgiving off to having a double that day. It was horrible. There was a glitch. That was the excuse. And instead of working to the problem, which I often would do and be ousted for, why are you in the weeds with this as a watch commander? We got it, ma'am. No, this person's coming and they have an issue. Deal with their issue. Stop brushing people off because it's going to make waves. I don't really want to deal with confrontation. If you don't want to deal with confrontation, take those bars, stars, stripes off, because that's what you signed up for. And like those people on overtime who want to just kick back, put their boots up. I'm the OG person and the other person can go and run around because they're used to being here and I don't really know this operation. That green money that you're getting time and a half on. And that's horrible because some people would challenge me and say, well, you shouldn't say that. You're a law enforcement officer. We need to stick together. I will stick with you if you're telling the truth. If you're mistreating people, you're creating favoritism and you're giving overtime to your friends and mistreating other people or passing people over, like Zoom user was saying, for a promotion per se. You're giving positions to people that actually don't deserve them. Some, you're just giving them and doing them a favor because now they got a good cush spot, because you hear that on our department, sadly enough. I was told that about the unit that I came to work. You get a county car, ma'am, and the place runs itself. And boy, was I in for a big run itself. The problem is, especially, I'm sorry, Eric, on the training officer or in that training and scheduling office, I had a captain that was okaying someone having 7 overtime spots as a lieutenant. And the person wasn't even showing up for the overtime spots. They'd come in late, they'd leave early. You're getting paid double. You're just handing that person money. Biggest show of favoritism ever. So Zoom user, I can't tell you that you're wrong. I wish I could tell you that you were. I wish I could stand up for it. And it does not. And I don't want this to be twisted for people who will watch this video later. Hear me clearly that I am not saying that everyone is like that. There are few that are that way. That lieutenant being okay with taking those spots with no problem. When I challenged it with the captain didn't have anything other than, let me see if I can get you some spots. I didn't even want the overtime, but just make it fair for me and all my peers. Give me the right of refusal. Don't stack the chips for one particular person. So Zoom user, I wish I had a better way to say, but you're spot on. It's not fair, and it needs to go by the merit too of what your capabilities are. Go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. And I just want to say this for anybody that's joining or, just got on or that's listening later, this all impacts employee retention, which is the topic that we're on. Because if people are not happy, if people see this, and, 2 things. Number one is this: there's other agencies that people can go work for. People leave and actually get out of the entire profession and go work elsewhere. And then the other thing is word of mouth. Don't think that within those people that want to get into the law enforcement industry, or maybe sometimes even those people that want to leave one agency and lateral to another one, they don't want to come to the sheriff's department. Or it gets in the community that, hey, if you go work there, you got to deal with this, you got to deal with that. This is an issue there, this is an issue. So they say, well, you know what, I'd rather go apply for Inglewood PD, for LAPD, for Manhattan Beach PD, for these other agencies, and that really impacts employee retention. But also the fact that what Cece mentioned earlier is, how do you deal with your employees? She talked about some fabricated cases being put on her. Who wants to deal with that? Who wants to keep going through it over and over and over again? Because that is some executive's way that they think they're going to get you, that they're going to get back at you for something that happened 20 years ago that you probably didn't do wrong anyway. They're just mad. Yeah, it's bad. It
Very
really
much
is
so.
bad. It's bad. And, you know, uh, there's a word or a topic or a phrase or a buzzword. I won't say it. I mean, it's a very important topic. It really is. But the thing that's going around right now is employee wellness. Employee wellness. And what's the biggest or what's the worst form of employee wellness, or the non-employee wellness? It's poor leadership. It's poor leadership. The best employee wellness that you can have is not giving your employees a bean bag and a foosball and some room that they can go kick back in. That's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. But the best employee wellness you can have is good leadership that's fair, that doesn't allow what Zoom user was talking about, doesn't allow this favoritism, doesn't allow people to take advantage of their positions, doesn't allow people to sit around and do nothing but get all of the cush positions because they go to the river with somebody, or you know what I mean, or they ride bikes with somebody, or they fish with somebody. The best employee wellness is strong leadership, and strong leadership, believe it or not, people want accountability. I'm sure Zoom
Yeah.
user wants to see accountability. You know what I mean? If not, and the reality of it is this, is that if you have true accountability, people will accept it even on themselves, because that becomes the culture. And the culture is not to mess up and get away with it. The culture is to do the right thing, to remain professional, to do it. And if you mess up, yeah, I messed up. You know what? Yeah, I may fall on the sword, and I get it. I understand why you're holding me accountable because I messed up. That's when you have a good culture.
Yeah. And it came to me as far as the overall arching is how you show up coming to work. I literally can say for the whole entire time of my career, from an early experience that I had as a young deputy, I learned to cover all bases. It literally is the reason I have a training program now, 7 C's of Survival and Sustainability, a law enforcer's guide to success within their career. And you can take that law enforcement part out and put a nurse's guide, a doctor's guide, because it's basically 7 steps that have nothing to do with your equipment and the profession alone, but just in life, things that actually were able to help me overcome those lies and combat some of that. But I learned to document to a degree where it called things into question. And so after a while, supervisors didn't like it, but they had no choice to go, I got to take a look at this, because she's not just pointing to it being wrong. She's pointing at it being wrong. She's showing me proof that it was wrong, and she's showing me a policy to back it up. So it became a system for me from early on as a deputy, and having not been believed about something that took place. I'm going to go to what's in the chat because I saw an interesting question. It says, and I'm so sorry, I think it was in there for a minute. I just saw and read through it. Has this bad leadership increased lately? If so, has it been the governmental rules, regulations that has caused it? I'm going to say to the first part of that question, I'm not present there within my particular agency, which was LASD, but I can tell you that bad leadership was in more recent times increased. We've always had it where there were bad leaders, and in particular with the change of the guard, and I knew and saw this coming in 2018 at the end of the year. We had someone come in, and what they did is they cut off the top 16 to 18 people in the organization. It was a retaliation of sorts. I work with these people, I didn't like them, and so now I'm sitting in the seat and I'm getting rid of them. So you, in essence, took the top part of the tip of the pyramid out of the department and then brought all your friends and put them into key positions. What does that do? It speaks to just what Zoom user was saying. Are these people qualified? Are we just throwing people in positions and now they're making more money? They're making decisions they probably don't know how to make. The commander and the chief that were involved in my case had only been in their seats for 6 months. One of them, as recent as the month before, in an acting position 2 levels above where they were actually assigned in rank. And it was all, in my opinion, strategically placed for that outcome. But you have a person come in answer to your question, is this bad leadership? Has it been the governmental rules, regulations that have caused it? I would say no. But I also know that certain things okayed become things that we lean to excuse. And what I mean by that is, now if there's an idea that maybe I won't get, I can get away with this, over time that continues. And we have a lot going on currently in the government level. You see out on the streets, some of the things in the media. It's, in my opinion, horrendous, because we have missed the mark on where we should be going in integrity, in courage, in honor. All those words have become just buzzwords, and then all the craziness has become more important, and lies are supported
Yeah.
on some
Yeah,
levels
and
too.
let me just backtrack just a little bit, CC. You talked about documenting and documentation and
Mhm.
keeping track and having evidence. And I want to say this. I learned firsthand, as CC mentioned early on, we used to work together, for several years. And I remember a particular incident that we were involved in. And she came and she told me, no, you need to send an email right now to
Mm.
operation, or not to operations, but to the watch commander, include the watch sergeant, blah, 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 because we did our initial reporting as we were supposed to, which was a verbal notification. She says, nope, I don't trust it. Get it documented, send an email, which we did, which actually saved us like what, maybe a year later, 8 or
It
9,
was a year.
where somebody tried to come in, although they knew that we reported it because they were on the first email, but they tried to lie and say we didn't report something and we had the proof. So documentation is key. But to speak to the thread or the chat where somebody said, has this bad leadership increased lately? I'm going to say a little something different. Absolutely, it has.
Mhm.
It's gotten even worse. As she mentioned back in 2018, somebody cutting off, the top 16 or 17, brain trust of the department. The bad part about it is that you then put people in that don't know what they're doing. You put people in that don't know the job, don't have the experience, and you're putting in, as the Zoom user said, their friends,
Mhm.
right? They're giving favoritism. But here's what's more important. I won't say more important, but what's equally important. When you look at the sheriff's department, unlike other agencies, beyond the rank of lieutenant, there is no test. There's nothing that determines a person's merit, education, ability, competence. There's no written test, there's no oral test, there's no inbox, there's nothing. It's just, hey, you're my guy, you're my girl. I'm gonna tap you on the shoulder. I knight you. You're now a chief. You're an
Absolutely.
assistant sheriff, and yesterday you were a lieutenant. And that doesn't mean that no lieutenant or those people could do the job. But what it means is when you do that and you're just putting people in there because they're your friend, because they did you a favor. But here's what it really means: you owe me. And I'm going
Mhm.
to give you this promotion. I'm going to give you this really big paycheck that is going to enhance your retirement and it's going to make your family. But I need you to deliver my message when, where, and how I tell you to deliver it. And you do that for me and you get the big paycheck. You get the bars and the stars on your collar, which is going to help out with your retirement, all these things. So it's really just a buying of loyalty, which is horrible, when you really think about it, because back to the question, and has it increased lately? I mean, it was the former sheriff Villanueva who did that, but then you had the new sheriff come in and keep all the same people. So you're the new sheriff and you say, I'm polar opposite of this guy, vote for me. And all of the people that were in position resonated with Villanueva's vibrations. He put them there. They were danced to his tune. So then what does it mean when you come in and say, I'm polar opposite, but now I'm going to keep all of you and I'm even going to promote many of you? What does that really tell you? To me, it means that they kind of resonate the same vibrations, or you're just buying their loyalty. And what happens is now we've had year after year after year of failed leadership, and it's driving the LASD department down. So I'm not really sure as to what you mean by the governmental rules and regulations, but I will say this. I've been in the profession since 1992, 1993. All kinds of laws and regulations have changed throughout that time. You know what I mean? And so it's up to leadership to adapt. It's up to the profession to adapt. You know what I mean? And to make sure that we follow those legislation and those governmental rules, right? So I don't think it's the rules that have caused bad leadership. I think it's poor character, poor values. I think it's a poor example of like, hey, if I'm willing to do this, I'll get promoted. And I just saw a video not too long ago about somebody was interviewing and they were interviewing an ICE agent. You know, it doesn't matter what agency they were from, but they were interviewing an ICE agent. And they said, hey, you got a 50,000 bonus for coming over here and doing this, but you're doing something, you know, whatever the conversation was. And the guy specifically said, well, you know what? I had bills to pay, and my bills were more important than my personal values. So basically, what he was saying, I sacrificed my personal values in order to get the money. And let's really think about it. I'll be quiet after this. I'm sorry, but the personal values, and I say this all the time, what you need to be successful and to be a good leader, most of us learn this like in kindergarten. Say please, say thank you, treat your neighbor nice, don't hit your neighbor. You know what I mean? Don't take anything from your neighbor. Say you're sorry when you're supposed to. It's very simple. So you would think that the majority of people grew up with those core values, those values of just, you know, but somewhere along the line, they figured out that, well, I can put that aside for the money. Well, I can put that value aside for the promotion. Well, I can put that value aside so I can have a better retirement. Next thing you know, you have no values. And
And
I don't, so
to
I'm sorry.
clarify, I took that part B along with the first part, and it was basically I was looking at it as more of everything we're seeing in society today, right now. So I may have merged those. So I'm not saying that it hasn't increased lately. I just see it from the angle of I was always able to see, and I knew there was some bad leadership even before. And then specifically in 2018, it was like really starting to spiral down or thereafter when that change of the guard took place. But I agree with you, Eric, that the character of the person means much and it matters a whole lot. It's what you're bringing into the fold. What do you bring to the table before you put that uniform on? And it is a perfect segue because I think our next topic coming up is right along those lines. If I'm not mistaken, I may have them backwards. How to treat others. It was learned in the third grade
Say
because
kindergarten. Sorry.
you said, but I love when you say kindergarten. You know, I was going to tease
Kindergarten.
you about that. But no,
Kindergarten.
we say it because we call it kindergarten, being funny. And we say it so much that way that I find myself saying kindergarten too. But kindergarten, garten doesn't always roll off the tongue. But how to treat others. Basically, I recently was scrolling, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be transparent. I go down a rabbit hole sometime on TikTok. I used to look and see, well, what is the whole thing with TikTok? Everybody's on this TikTok and they're watching all these videos and they're just really short. And they say the attention span of most people is very short. So it's easier to get their attention in small snippets. But I've seen some people just going off the rails and just basic common human decency is just gone. I don't know any other way to say it, but people are rude. They're saying things crazy to people. I see people getting hit in the face. I posted a video about this myself personally on TikTok, one of the places that I didn't even understand, and now I'm scrolling through using it. But the idea that we have lost just the basic common decency drives me up a wall. I remember my parents hammering into me to be respectful to other people. My dad always said, you never let someone kick you, spit on you, or slap you. Those are the three things that, for whatever reason, they were an irritation for him. But he says that's some of the most degrading things that you can do to people. So I learned to navigate spaces by leading with what my grandmother taught me. If you can't be kind, be cordial. If you can't be cordial, be quiet. And here recently, I've probably gone into a silence cave because some of the attitudes and the things that I have seen. I saw a lady come into a medical office the other day, and clearly the young lady said, we sent out an email and let you know that our machines are down, so we're not going to be able to perform your procedure, your test that she would had originally been scheduled for. And the woman just wasn't having it. I came all the way down here. You don't have at least one machine so that you can do my procedure? I'm sitting there like, I clearly heard her that she said the machines are down. She went on even to say, and it's what I call moving the finish line. when the young lady said again, well, we sent out emails. I'm so sorry, ma'am. Instead of saying, okay, I didn't get the email. I missed that. So that's why I drove. She literally agreed with the woman and said, I got the email, but I need my procedure done. I will be going out of town and I won't be able to get this done. And I need this done sooner rather than later. She wasn't connecting that the machines are down. You can want until you're blue in the face, but there's nothing that we can do for you. So she moved the finish line again. When the young lady says, we can't help you, we don't have the machines or not. Well, what are these people sitting in the lobby for? What are they waiting for? Well, to see their doctors for different procedures. I don't have to give you their information of why they're here. And there was just nothing that was getting into this woman's brain that this test is not going to happen. It's a tragedy. I get it because it has disrupted your life, but sometimes we're so disrupted and offended and upset that we aren't hearing each other. And you know me, with a lot of the tensions that we're having in these days, we do not order from a menu. And if you all got a menu that I didn't get before I dropped out of my mother's womb, that said I could check off and say that I was going to be 5'4", I'm not telling my weight, born on this day. If there was something that I got a chance to choose who I would be born into, how is that held against me in any way, form, or fashion? We are not kind enough to each other until there's a reason to shift. We don't go to how we treat others. It's I'm going to get mine in this life, and how it lands on you, who cares? As if we live in this space and this world by ourselves. And I don't know, this one's an interesting one for me. How do we treat others? And then you carry that into the uniform and project that same craziness out to others. And I think it's insanity. That's just me.
I'll tell you that dignity, just common decency, respect. Again, I was just talking about it, those basic things that we learned because you now put on a uniform, none of that should go away. And there's a saying, if you want to see the true character of a person, give them power. And when you put on that uniform and you put on that badge and you have that gun on your side, it gives you a lot of power. You have those handcuffs. It gives you a lot of power. You have the power, you have the authority to tell people what to do. You have the authority to take a person's freedom from them. You know, you have the authority to detain them, you know, to put them in the backseat of a car. You have all of this authority that is given to you by legislation, by those governmental rules, and you can abuse it or you can use it wisely. You actually have the authority when legally justified. You're the only person out there legally justified to carry a weapon and to use it not only in the defense of yourself, but in the defense of others. You know, so in essence, you're almost given the authority to take life. And so you want to see the true character of a person, give them that kind of power. And how do we treat others? And oftentimes what I've seen is that I can treat you however I want to treat you because I have the authority. I have the badge. And there's nothing you can do about it. And just shut up and do what I tell you to because I told you to do it. Do you see the badge? You've seen it on TikTok. We've all seen it on these Instagram reels. The cops saying, because I told you to, because I said so. I remember it must have been maybe around 1998, maybe early 99. I know my son, who's 28 now, was in the cart. He was in the shopping cart with his legs sticking out. And we were coming out of a store. And I used to do all the cool cop stuff. I worked gangs. I was on a SWAT team. You know what I mean? I was out there and I was doing police work. And this guy walks up to me as I'm walking out of the store and he says, "Hey, aren't you a cop?" And I looked at him. I'm in civilian clothes and I'm like, "Can I help you?" He says, "Your name is Strong." And I'm like, okay. And so this is something that they teach you about, that people are going to recognize you because you impact their life. For you, you deal with this all the time. You're not going to recognize the people before they recognize you. And they tell you to be very wary about this, to retrain this. So I'm like, uh-oh, this is one of those situations. He says, you don't remember me, do you? He says, you don't. And I said, no. He says, you took me to jail. And I'm going to just use a little bit of the language that he used. He says, you don't remember. He says, but
Careful, careful.
you beat my butt. That's what he said.
I like how
Okay.
you clean that up.
Right. And now I'm starting to push the cart away because my son's in the car and I'm like, I don't know where this is going. And he saw what I was doing and he said, wait. He says, he says, hold on. and he actually chuckled. He says, I can see where this is going. He said, listen, he says, I've been in trouble with the law my entire life.
Mm.
He says, in that particular night, I was wrong. I ran from you. I fought with you. He said, you handled your business. You did everything you were supposed to do. And then he says, but one thing that he did, he said, when it was all said and done, you had the handcuffs on. He said, you picked me up. He says, you actually dusted my pants off and you asked me if I was okay. And I remember him saying, I must have got a napkin or something out of the car because he was scraped up and bleeding, and I wiped it off, poured a little water on him. He says, I've never had a cop do that before.
Mm.
And the more I think about that story and that it actually happened, one thing is this: just because you got to take a bad person to jail, it means you have to disrespect them, demean them, degrade them, dehumanize them. But the one thing that I take away from this as I've moved throughout this career is that what I did that day wasn't taught to me by the department. That was taught to me by my dad. You know what I mean? It was my dad that said, hey, Eric, when the handcuffs are on, the fight is over. That's it. You don't get one extra lick. And by the way, he had been a police officer for 26 years. He said, you don't get an extra lick. He says, you don't get to be mad. You don't get to call them out their name. He said, you pick them up and you dust them off. And I always remember that. And I always tried to do that. And it comes to me that that's one of those values that I learned at home. But why isn't the department teaching that? Why is that not part of our curriculum and part of our expectation? Not because it's a policy, not because it's the law that you have to render medical aid, because legally, if you don't, you increase liability. Why isn't it just part of good human character?
I can
So,
say, and I'm going to toot my own horn, when I was a drill instructor on the campus, I would always infuse things of just this nature. I would pull my platoons and sometimes the whole entire class aside, and I would tell them about how they treat others. One person in the chat said, in law enforcement, many of us find it more challenging dealing with our partners or superiors than with the public. I'm going to agree with you, Zoom user.
that's
I am a
deep.
true testament of that, and
Wow.
very deep, because I struggled with that, and not just in the recent time with the lies, but over my career. And I learned ways to actually combat it, but it is draining, very draining. And then they further go on to say, why is it, I'm sorry, that when someone speaks up about misconduct or tries to address issues directly, they're often labeled as confrontational instead of being recognized for holding others accountable? Boy, does this not speak to me, because me pushing back when that a particular supervisor was wanting to have me lie, when this supervisor was also, mistreating several people who would come to me, and then I would have to make that mandated phone call. I was just, oh my gosh, calm down. And I'd even get peers telling me, you need to be careful. When Eric was speaking earlier about watching the landmines, I had a commander, after the captain wanted me to change a report, tell me, hey, you need to decide what hill you want to die on. It was basically a dog whistle of sorts, a wink, wink, hint, hint. Hey, if you don't go along with this could be damaging to your career. And me getting that tap on the shoulder that Eric said earlier is how you get into the next rank. Because like you said, you can't test into captain and above. It's a gift. is what I call it, because they just pick and choose whoever they want to in that position. Another thing that counters that, they need more training. No, we need to enforce it and actually teach it the right way, is what I would say.
It's
And
easier. Oh,
it's
go ahead.
easier. Yeah, it's easier to just let it flow. Whatever's happening, everything goes. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, you're too serious, Sherrod. Back when I
Then
was
they
a
have to be the
deputy, and
bad
you,
guy.
yeah, you're too serious, strong. You calm down. It's not that serious. And I was considered confrontational. And even that word I can't stand for someone to use. Oh, you're being aggressive. Like, how was I aggressive calling you out on your wrongdoing? And the other part to that comment, or being an honest person rather than not addressing it and talking behind partners' backs. So basically, the whispers in the locker room, which one of our episodes, we were talking about that. How loud is that voice once it's outside? And in my case, it was always, let me address it right here, face front. And I would have people pulling on my shirt, like tugging, like, you may not want to do that. You got to be careful in which room you're in. But right is right and wrong is wrong. And it doesn't change just because of the room that you're in. It just, and that bothers me. It didn't make me popular. Don't get me wrong. It did not make me popular, but I wasn't going for popularity. I was going for what I swore to and what I said I would uphold. So,
No,
yeah, I get a little
it's,
passionate about that kind of stuff.
I know you do, and I think we both do. I think one of the key things that is so it just jumps out to me in this statement, and this is for people that may watch this later or for people in the audience that are not in law enforcement, is this. Many of us find it more challenging dealing with our partners and superiors than with the public. That is deep. That is deep. That really speaks to what we were talking about earlier. That really speaks to culture.
Mhm.
When you're, you know, a key topic or one of the topics on, within LASD, within the sheriff's department, that always comes up is this deputy gangs or these deputy cliques thing, you know. And here's the one thing that I would always say when people would challenge me on this, when I would say, yes, they exist. I've actually investigated them when I was at Internal Affairs. And the people that want to defend it within the department that would challenge me on it, this is what I would tell them. I said, okay, let's just say that you don't think that they exist. Why is it that Sentry deputies would look down upon and disregard Cerritos deputies? Why
Mm.
would Lennox deputies or East LA deputies or Compton deputies look down upon and disregard Lameda deputies? I said, if you don't want to admit that it happens, or if you don't want to admit that there's not these cliques that impact the public, you know full well what the Sentry nod is,
Hmm.
what the SEB nod is. You know full well that this stuff exists. So if these cliques don't exist, why do we have this division within our own department? And I would say this, if you can't even treat your own partners, the people that you went to the same academy with, you went through the same training with, you put on the same uniform, the same badge, carry the same equipment, drive the same car with every single day, we have our own deputies and supervisors and management executives and above that will treat their brothers and sisters different because of where they're assigned. And not only that, I'm going to go to this. We've had deputies, and I call it the gangster jump and the gangster stomp, other deputies
Mm.
because, oh, you disrespected my station, or you don't belong to my station, and are you kidding me? I mean, people don't understand how deep this statement is. It's more challenging dealing with our own partners or superiors than dealing with the public. Wow. I just have to highlight that. But to second what Cece was saying, and when someone speaks up about misconduct or tries to address the issues, they're labeled as confrontational instead of being recognized for holding others accountable. Yeah, because you know what? It's easier to just let stuff go. It's easier to just let things slide. And I'll leave with this. I'm going to leave with this. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a new unit, a new station. And when I would go in, maybe as an operations level person or as a lieutenant, um, or a unit commander, I walk in the door. I'm just going to give you a very basic example. I walk in the door, and this has happened to me a couple of times, and there's a dude that's got a handlebar mustache. I mean, this sucker is curled and waxed. I mean, and for those you don't know, that's against our policy. Your mustache is supposed to be within the edges of your lips, not to be extreme. And I see these people come in with these Fu Manchu mustaches. It's clearly out of policy. So, one thing I do is I look at the deputy, and I'm not mad at the deputy. What I do is I go like, who's the lieutenant that was here before? Why haven't you? Who are the sergeants that see this person every day, that have conversation and joke with this person in the hallway every day? You want me to come in and address it? Guess what? I will. I will tell that deputy by the next time he comes back to work on his kickoff, his mustache, it needs to be groomed within policy. But guess what? You, sergeant, or you, lieutenant, are getting a PLE. You're getting written up because you walk by it. Why should I have to come in here and address this? And guess what? He didn't grow that over the weekend. This has been going on for months, and if not longer, even longer. And if you can't have people that take the stripes and take the bars and just address something as simple as proper grooming standards, they can't even address somebody that they see. Hey, I mean, in other words, how the mustache get down here? Because when it got to here, somebody should have said, hey, that's getting a little long. It's getting a little wide. Hey, make sure you go ahead and trim that up. How I get down to here? How I get to handlebars and nobody said anything? How do we really expect them to address the big stuff? How do we really expect them to address the things that violate the public trust? Failed leadership. Failed leadership, failed leadership, failed leadership, time and time again, at every level, at every rank, is what it really comes down to.
And the brotherhood in law enforcement is our last topic, and it's there as brotherhood for a reason, because the percentages of women within the law enforcement profession are much lower. And I remember a comment being said, and it was posed on a radio show. If LAPD and LASD were to have a all out brawl or whatever, who would win? And it was said that LAPD would win because LASD has a higher complement of women. I think
Sure.
yeah. And I say that because sometimes the voice of a woman, and I'm going to speak about women, so those of you who it just unnerves you for me to even bring this up, the voice of women is muted in a lot of situations, but yet it is appreciated in the situations where the men don't want to deal with it. I remember doing, hey, Sherrod, can you come over here and do this rape report? Because unfortunately, with that word, and it is horrible, let me be clear and make sure that I say that, but they wanted you to come and do the parts of the job that no one wanted to handle. I remember being a drill instructor, and one of my partners was standing and kind of yelling at a recruit. And all of a sudden, his whole face changed, and he was almost looking at me like a help me. What she was sharing was of a personal feminine problem nature. He didn't want to deal with it at all. So he just looked at me and, yo, just go see Deputy Sherrod. And the person runs over to me, and I'm like, oh, because she almost had him. He wasn't knowledgeable enough to know, sweetheart, that is not, I'm so sorry, an excuse for you not going on this run. So go ahead. Stretching will help you. Go ahead and get out there. Let's see. Now, if it gets to be too much, we have remedies for that. But this person had pulled this before because it was an easy out. The sad part about it is the same things that they will cry about with women. Can she pack her mud? How strong is she in this sense? Sometimes they will also use and lean on those things to be a deflection and a buffer. But the brotherhood in law enforcement or sisterhood should never be where you allow your partner to be okay with doing wrong, where you think that it is okay and you can basically just do whatever you want to do. And because we wear the uniform, we get a pass. We get a pass on wrongdoing because I'm the authority and I wear the badge. You see this badge? You see this gun belt? That's why. And someone's asking you a basic question of, why did you stop me? What's the harm in telling them? unless you're working backwards and you're trying to fill in the blanks of why you really stopped them or why you're contacting them, why is it that you shut up, you do what I'm going to say, you do what I say, and don't question me? And you're making your own job even harder. It's astounding to me. It really is. And as we are drawing closer to the end, I see that we have another comment in the comments in the chat. This is a good and needed podcast. Has anyone asked you about taking it to other places? Cece definitely had a such a time as this idea. Prayers and God's blessings in Jesus Christ. Thank you so much for actually saying that. And yes, I've actually had some people reach out and ask for the chapter. I believe, Eric, in Atlanta, one of our people that joined us on one of the other episodes asked where the Atlanta chapter is. And hey, it is coming. That's what I will say to you, that this is stretching and it will broaden, not just within this agency or the agencies here in California, but the goal is to take it even farther, because these necessary Code3 conversations are a must. There is no way out of the craziness unless we just really address the problems that we have. And with that being said, Eric is actually mirroring that. And the goal is for this to be seen everywhere. If you know or have an audience that you think could benefit, please put it in the chat with contact info and we will reach out. You can also send any questions about this podcast, and we call it a community cast, but you can send any questions to info@ccstrong.com. And that goes to my team. They can actually respond and communicate with you. You are more than welcome to join in these discussions because we have them every second and fourth Wednesday of the month. If you're going through or you're having a problem in your workplace, it doesn't have to be law enforcement. I actually have programs where I will work with you hand in hand and walk you through the steps of navigating those choppy waters. For me to have actually been a David to a huge Goliath of a department which was trying to bury me, literally derailing my career, what they did is they actually gave me even more of a platform and a voice through the victory of me actually winning the arbitration. So again, my contractual rights were deemed to have been violated, and they said that I had been disciplined without just cause. So you think about that, 4 years of my life trying to prove that I was not telling a lie. And I also just recently got word that we are going into mediation, and there's a trial date set for my lawsuit, which was filed. So we will see how that comes out in the wash and in the end. But I can tell you that I work with people currently who, and am able to show them how I was able to bubble wrap myself even before there was something wrong. It's like firefighters. They don't always respond to fires, but they train hard behind the scenes in order to be able to do so. So I say prior proper planning prevents, I won't say the other P word, performance. And it's the P word, poor performance. So prior proper planning prevents
Poor
poor
performance.
performance. And I learned that in the military, and that has stuck with me because the DI kept saying that, like, you better plan, and prior planning works. And for me, that prior planning was that I was so angry that I developed even a program, Mad Resilience, where it's mentally, actively, demonstratively, and I document everything in resilience. So with that, thank you for the person who said that in the chat. That warms my heart, that you think this is a good podcast. And yes, the hope is that it's branching even farther. So please reach out on that front. And as we come to a close, I want to be able to share quickly the screen with you. There are so many ways to find out more, to watch some of the videos that I post. I am up to document 109, I believe, where I am sharing the background of what happened in my case. And I have people saying, you should think about a documentary with this because this is unheard of. And I am happy to say, and I am able to say to you that I work with people for this very reason. In my final, and I only have a few minutes left, but I'm going to actually give those to my husband and let you know that this gentleman who's on this podcast with me actually is running again for sheriff. And this time I'm retired, so they can't come after me. Thankfully, I have nothing to do with it. But I think he should have won that first time around. And if you know anyone in the Los Angeles County area, you can vote for him. And I guarantee I will hold his foot to the fire here at home because I'm not there anymore and make sure that he is giving LA County his very best. So, Eric, I'm going to leave it with you, wrapping us up. Give us a few information and a little bit about your information, and I'm going to answer the chat because someone's asking about the contact.
Well, thank you for that. And, part of the where we are today with even doing these type of webinars and podcasts is because of the things that we've seen go on within the department, particularly within LASD. And we know that it doesn't have to be this way. One of the things I want to say is this: you have proof. You hear me speaking, you hear me talking. This will be, it's forever memorialized. And if I don't do what I say I'm going to do, as CC said, she doesn't hold my feet to the fire. You'll at least be able to say, hey, this is what this guy said on this date and time. But the reality of it is this: failed leadership has gotten us where we are. And we need leadership that's going to be bold and deliberate. We need leadership that is going to hold people accountable. We need leadership that is not going to just play the political game of, I just want to be friends and nice with everybody. And we talked about it these last two administrations. This department has gone downhill. Don't be fooled into thinking that recruitment and retention is a problem. It's failed leadership. Don't be fooled into thinking that the reason that the jails are so bad is because of the four walls and the floor and the ceiling are old. False. It's failed leadership. You can look it up. Bonta, the attorney general, is suing the department and the current sheriff. Listen, it's not the four walls and the ceiling that are serving people spoiled, moldy food. That's a people issue. We heard from somebody today talking about the culture within the department. That's a people issue. And when you're talking about people issues, you're talking about failed leadership. So I know we got to wrap it up. We got to go. Strong, the number 4, sheriff. So strong4sheriff.com, www.strong4sheriff is my Facebook, my Instagram. Please go look it up. Appreciate your support, amplification, donations, all of that. And you can reach me there as well to ask further questions. Thank you.
So thank you, Eric. And I just dropped also the contact information for me and also for Eric. Please spread the word. He is running again for 2026, strong, the number 4sheriff.com. And we are so grateful that you spent your evening with us. It has not missed on us at all that you took your time out to be a part of this community cast. And we thank the Zoom user for coming over from the audience and lending some more voice to what we are doing. So I say, don't forget to join the think tank. You'll get more information about that because you signed up with this platform. And we would love to have a deeper dive and discussion with you. Please reach out. And we thank you for your time. And thank you once again for joining us here for our Code 3 Conversations. Have an amazing night, blessings, and we wish you all the best.